Okay, we are live for the first time. Teflon Tales on a Sunday, Pacific Zone, 11 a.m. With me, I have Ben Veal. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Hi, Ashwin. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, and just FYI, we're doing it on a Sunday because Ben is on the other side of the Ward Pond over here, to be specific, in UK. And again, a quick intro. Teflon Tales is really interviewing people who live a Teflon life, aka get hot very quickly, cool down, remain balanced, flexible, and remain non-sticky. But a bigger message is not just about themselves, but the broader society and the purpose behind their mission. So, in that vein, I'm going to intro something in terms of how you and I met, right? Which is also very instructive. So you, we'll talk about this post of yours, but the thing about the post that caught my attention is because Simon Harris, who is a common connection, had commented on that, and that caused me to go. And the title itself was catchy, right? Which is redundancy, the best career choice I never made. And then I went down that, and it really struck me. So again, a quick intro to who you are, and then let's get into it.
Absolutely. So my name's Ben. I have worked in PR and marketing for about 15 years. I'm based in the southwest of England, and I run a small comms consultancy called Second Mountain Communications.
Okay, so we'll start off with that name itself, the Second Mountain Communications. Let's come to the first mountain first. So there was something that happened about a year ago that many people have faced with as well, which is job redundancy, right? And you had caused it. It has caused you to kind of go down a path that otherwise you would have never chosen. So first off, talk about. I think you used four words when adjectives that hit you when anxiety, worry, self-worth. So all of those things hit you when April of 2020 came around. So talk about really what happened at that time and what were the immediate reactions, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're certainly not alone in terms of going through this position. There's been hundreds of thousands of people have gone through this now. So this is just my own personal experience, Ashwin. But the pandemic hit it really came into effect in March last year in the UK. That's when we went into our full lockdown, and I think it just blindsided everyone. It certainly caught me really unawares. You could see it coming, but you couldn't see that incredible force with which suddenly society just locked down pretty much overnight, and everything that we'd ever kind of held dear just stopped. And I'd started a new PR role about 8-9 months previously in a senior position, and just unfortunately wasn't tenable to keep me on when the restrictions hit and suddenly everything just changed. So about three weeks or so into the lockdown, I was unfortunately let go. In those preceding 3 weeks, I had tried as much as possible to try and keep a business as usual mentality. So to put it into a bit of context, my wife's a key worker in the NHS, she's a healthcare professional. I've got 2 children. I've got a 6-year-old who's got additional needs, and at the time, a 1-year-old. There was no space in the house that was quiet. I didn't have an internet connection that would even allow for the kind of working that has now become commonplace. It was just from start to finish, it was an impossible situation. I did my best. I was waking up at 3 a.m. to try and clear my inbox or to try and do writing work, because I just knew that those snatches of time that would be necessary to do a professional job like mine were just impossible during a 9 to 5. So I think the writing was on the wall. I wasn't at all surprised when I got the news, but I think I was shocked at the speed with which it hit me. We had the furlough scheme in place in the UK, which was pretty unprecedented, really. I think I probably naively thought that would at least allow me a couple of months to adjust to the homeschooling situation or the chaos. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But I think at the time, I used a few adjectives in terms of, I think I was scared, I was anxious, I was confused. I was also very angry. I was very angry at the whole situation. I mean, I know in the grand scheme of things, and what we have seen since, a job loss is nothing in the comparison of our health and the health of our family and our loved ones. So But at the time when COVID was such a new thing, before the days of social distancing and lockdowns and everything else became commonplace, it was, I think most of us just went into our shells in terms of how does this affect me and my immediate family. And I was terrified. I've worked in this career for 15 years. I'd climbed the corporate ladder to get to this point, which I thought was the point, really. And overnight, literally, it stopped. And I was very angry about the situation because I felt that it was out of my control. I think that was the hardest bit, that sense that you literally have no control over that situation. And that's a situation I've never been in before. So that was April 2020.
Yeah.
And
so I want to interject you a little bit over here. One is, so the day it hit and the next day you kind of wake up and you did something at that point, which I think embodies Teflon, which is the ability to cool down. And yet you gave way to the emotion, which is good, right? Which is really the outlet we all need. But you did something which you and I talked about earlier, which is remarkable in terms of being able to focus away from yourself, which helped with the cooling. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I knew immediately that this was an opportunity to do something else. I thought this has not happened at this point in my life for me to just jump into another job. I thought I had been considering for a long time. I mean, so I guess to backtrack a bit, pre-COVID, I had realized for quite a long time that actually the way in which we all work, that traditional, or the way in which we all worked, the 9-to-5 office-based long commute setup that had become the norm for many years, I realized was proving impossible for me to really be the kind of father and the provider and rounded person that I wanted to be. So as soon as this hit, I thought there's an opportunity here, but I can't visualize and can't think what it is. I need time. So I jumped straight into a bit of a crazy challenge, really, which is I hopped on an exercise bike. We were on full lockdown in the UK. At that point, we were in literally leave your house once a day for exercise and nothing else. So I borrowed an exercise bike and I decided I was going to cycle from the top of the country to the bottom of the country. So I mapped out what that was. It was about 1,300 kilometers, about 890 miles. And I just set off and I set myself 1 or 2 hours a day to just cycle and do as much as I could. And I did that. We've got a big mental health charity in the UK called Mind. And I did it as a sponsorship opportunity for them. And every day just kind of kept people updated on social media in terms of what I was doing to raise funds. And it raised a nice pot of money. And I think it was good because I think at that point, the mental health conversation was really starting to increase. And now that's become commonplace, which is great. But what it did is it gave me time every single day to really think and do a bit of a life audit. So, I mean, yes, I did use some of that time to watch Netflix. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't 35 days of cycle-based meditation, but I did spend a lot of time thinking, what is this? What are my skill sets? What am I passionate about? What do I want to do after this? And how can I make that happen? Because if I'm not intentional, if I don't take steps now, when the world has stopped, then it will just pass me by. And this opportunity, which, you know, in a way has been gifted to me, I've got to make something out of this. And I was determined very quickly. I didn't want redundancy to define me. I wanted to own it.
Wow, life audit. I mean, that just hits you sometimes, right? And how, and we talked about this a little bit again about the community that you lean on, right? The importance of that. The second aspect of it is the ability for somebody to do something new versus going back and figuring out the same mountain to climb again just to hopefully not get redundant again, but chances of that are happening are still high. So, and again, I'm just looking for what the viewers and listeners can take away from what gave you the confidence, what gave you the courage, what gave you the temerity even to try something different, number one. But number two, it's not just starting second mountain comms. It is also the purpose behind it. right? It's just not another business. If I look at it, the percentage of, I mean, the customers you choose are very conscious. The ability for you to give back to the community is also very conscious. So how did that come about, and was that kind of an overnight awakening, or was it something in the making for a while?
Yeah, so in terms of the positioning, so Second Mountain Comms is all about helping good people and good business leaders do good. It's as simple as that. So I've worked in PR, I've worked in content marketing and writing for 15 years. So the communication side of things is a given for what I do. But actually, over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with some fantastic, very ethical, very purpose-led companies. And they have always been the ones that I've gravitated towards. Wherever you see a business leader who's genuinely passionate about making a difference in the world, whether that's big or small, are the ones that I've always felt I want to champion and support. So when I thought, if I'm going to do this for myself, I can be very, very selective. And I set out to do that from day one, just only work with people who I feel are driven by a moral compass that feels very comfortable to me and that feels authentic. And actually, as a proposition, that seems to have really resonated. But going back to your earlier point about knowing when it was right to do it, I think, to be honest, in the context of where we were, the world had literally stopped. Nothing was happening. There was this, for the first time ever, there seemed to be this real groundswell of vulnerability that was opening up. So I think people had been really humbled by the pandemic in those first couple of months, which were truly surreal when you were looking at news images of Times Square and Piccadilly Circus just barren of people, and you were seeing all these A-lister pop stars and Hollywood icons just locked into their homes, and you suddenly realised, from CEOs to politicians to the great elite of celebrity, everyone was just going through this unbearable situation and struggling to cope with it. And I think that gave me the confidence to try, just to think, if there's ever going to be a time to try something and be brave, it's now. It's the first time that you could genuinely run a business from your home and it not come across as necessarily an amateur endeavour. Certainly in my industry, it actually suddenly became possible. I've been saying for years that it's completely viable to do everything I do from your home. There is no need to travel for hours a day just to go to an office, just to arbitrarily sit at a desk to do the same job I do. But I think this opened up the doors to say, actually, the technology's there, you can do everything, and it makes no difference. So I think it was timing. The timing and circumstance was, let's take a go. I was incredibly nervous about it, but I also really tapped into some fantastic people who gave me a lot of confidence, gave me a lot of guidance, really using my professional network on LinkedIn and Twitter and people I've known for years to, whilst I didn't want to speak openly about my redundancy, and that post you mentioned was the first time I've really spoken about it a year on, I went out to a few people, I reached out and asked them, I said, this has happened. Can you give me some advice in terms of carving out a proposition, understanding how I want to go out to market as a comms consultant, being really clear on my skill set, and building a brand. And I'm so grateful for those people that gave me that kind of advice and support at the time.
Wow. So talking about another Teflon attribute, which is really the ability to get hot on a number of different things simultaneously. So again, I mean, I can relate to you 100% because I used to be for a large company and I got laid off, and then we kind of get into this world of, okay, now we're on our own. And it's how did you make that mindset shift of, okay, I'm working for a large company and there's this, my boss, so he or she is giving me a list of things to do, I just have to do my job and then come back, and versus having to constantly experiment, because maybe podcast was a thing yesterday, maybe it's video today, maybe video goes away and you have to do a TikTok avatar. So the ability for somebody to kind of not just take that step towards something new, but also realize that this is an age of constant experimentation, right? And you mentioned COVID being the leveler, the next wave could come and something else could kind of completely be redundant. So again, any tips on how you kind of keep yourself relevant and engaged and experimenting all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of where I was, I mean, I'd moved up over the course of years in terms of kind of position, I guess, seniority within comms agencies. And so through that, I'd had the chance to kind of build quite a lot of different skills in different areas. So if this had happened 5 years ago, I think I'd have been in a very different position. I had a better understanding of how to kind of develop a brand, how to use technologies, and that kind of thing. But I mean, I think what I'd say, since I have set up a business, it has been such a steep learning curve, from learning everything from accountancy to branding to HR to all the legalese. There's so much to learn about running even a small business. But just ask people you trust. Just don't be afraid to go out and speak to people and ask for advice. I think the last year has been such a great leveler in terms of people really supporting one another, and there's been so many great communities that come together to do that. And then, the internet's a fantastic tool. There's very little that you can't learn with intent. I mean, I'm still, things like from coding to kind of SEO writing, to building a brand proposition, to actually developing the brand itself. All of those things, there's experts that have written about all of those things. And then read. Just read. I mean, I'm a prolific reader. If I could, I would spend hours a day with my head buried in a book, and just absorb what's out there, really, and just really, be authentic to yourself, but also be humble enough to know that there are people that know much more than you do.
So that actually leads into another Teflon attribute, which is the ability to cool down, right? And you kind of walked right into it, which is there's lots of information out there, right? And as a solopreneur, trying to do like 20 different functions all at the same time, pretty much the ability to kind of burn both ends of the candle is really high, right? And mental health, you mentioned mental health, right? And physical self-being and self-awareness and just taking care of oneself becomes incredibly hard, because you're trying to do so much. So talk a little bit about how you ensure that balance so that you're able to come back every single day energized without burning yourself out.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. There's the cooling down, and there's also, I know part of the Teflon life is stickiness. And actually, I think one part I would say about stickiness is knowing what to stick to. So actually being really clear about the things that you need to stick to rigidly in your life that are good for you and your family. So for me, it is exercise every day, very, very focused exercise, and outdoor exercise specifically. Taking time to yourself. I do it. I replace my commute now with 30 minutes every single morning without fail, doing hard exercise. And that is a great stabilizer for me, and it has a great impact on my family. In terms of managing a very diverse workload, which you have as an owner operator, my number one bit of advice would actually be do one thing at a time. That's one thing I've really learned in the last year. It's so easy to have multiple windows that get pulled in lots of different directions, but actually, focus your calendar, be really rigid with your time, be a real custodian of your time, and know the things that are essential to do, and make sure you don't get distracted from them, because if you allow it, you will get pulled from pillar to post, and everyone wants a piece of your time. And I think coming off that, the other real skill, I think the strongest word in the English language is saying no, and just actually knowing what is good for you and what is good for those around you, and your purpose and your business's purpose. And when requests come in, actually really being clear about your boundaries and whether or not it's a good fit for you, whether it's beneficial for the person, and being able to actually push back and say no if it's not right. But also knowing when you need to go that little extra and put time in for people when those requests come in. So it's a balance, but it's a case, I think, of when I talked about life auditing earlier, I think it's a case of almost daily auditing. At the moment, we're so busy. Life, it's crazy, but life is still, in theory, life should be a lot quieter still, because we're still in the midst of this. But it just feels like the days fly by now. I think everyone's on constant video calls and glued to our PCs, and it's just a really important thing to actually make sure you carve out time in the day for yourself, and to cool down, and make sure that you have evenings, you spend time with your families, you switch off, and you don't let work dominate your life. And that's for me has been, when I come back to Second Mountain and the impetus of the name, this is all about For me, I want the second mountain of my life, the second half of my life, to be much richer, much more authentic, much more meaningful than the first half. The first half of my life, I realise in retrospect, was a huge amount of trying to acquire status, trying to climb the ladder, which was what I always thought success looked like, trying to make money, trying to do all the things you're supposed to do, the life stage, the mortgage, the marriage, the children, all of that. And actually, I think if you're not careful, that just becomes life. You can never have enough stuff. You can never earn enough stuff. You can never be successful enough if you follow that. For me, I just want a simple second mountain life where it's about giving back to other people. So you mentioned about my client base. From day one, I set out to do 20% pro bono work. I'm working with a couple of faith-based charities that I deeply believe in. That was from day one. That's not going to be a compromise. But it's also been about making sure that I have time with my children each and every day, proper time, as in doing the school run, doing bedtime with them, thinking about footballs, reading with them, all the things that I found so hard to do when I was doing a 40, 50 hour week in the commute. I could just never do it. I just felt like I was always missing. I knew they were special moments. I knew that I was missing moments, and the years just flew by. And I'm absolutely determined that I'm not going to miss any more of those years.
Wow. So as you were speaking, I got reminded of a quote from Confucius. We all lead two lives. Our second life begins when you realize you have only one left. And it's one of those quotes that sticks in my head. So coming back to that article, I'm going to read this out because it just jumps out, and we can close with this, with your thoughts. The events of the past 12 months have made me realize that everything happens for a reason, and that the many small moments we miss in our hurry to reach the top of the mountain soon add up. Pretty soon, there's a risk we can find ourselves at the summit with no one to share the view with. Now that is profound, right? It's interesting because I've kind of, like I said, I've gone through this myself, and again look around and say, okay, so now what is this it? And so what advice do you have for people, right? And you and I, like, okay, there was an external force that happened in our lives, and then shift happened, right? For somebody who's stuck in that hedonic treadmill, how do they acquire the skills, even if they have that internal gnawing saying, hey, this is probably not the mountain I want to climb, and if I can't climb up there, to your point, there's going to be no one around, but I only have this mountain. This is the only thing I can see. I only have skills to go up this. I can't do something else. Where do they start, and how do they kind of get that ability to step off?
I mean, that's a good question. I think all of us have choices. None of our paths are fully defined, and whilst circumstance, especially financial circumstances, will dictate certain careers for a certain period of time, it's not like you can just suddenly one day just change your job. Unless something like this has happened, I appreciate this is quite an unusual situation that I've been in, and I consider myself very grateful for that. I think all you can do is each day just try to make each day you live a little bit better than the one before, if you can. If you can't, analyze each night, what could I have changed? What could be better for tomorrow? Practice self-awareness and practice gratitude. Those things have been invaluable to me in terms of actually looking back on the day. And in that becomes those moments where you start to realize that I want more of those moments. That was a great moment. I really enjoyed that. And when it comes to work, especially, really thinking in terms of this could be for any industry, what are the parts of my job that I really enjoy, and focusing on those rather than the things that you don't enjoy, because those can be changed and often they are psychological. What are the bits that I really enjoy? Is there a way that I could gravitate towards another company? Are they transferable skills? Could I move to a different sector? Could I do something completely different that still allows me to utilize my strengths? And I think just having self-belief, and also having someone or people in your life that you trust, that you can talk to. So rather than, it's not about making a jump and immediately going, I'm going to do something new tomorrow. It's taken small steps. I mean, I'm a very pragmatic person. The reason I hadn't set up a company for years beforehand was self-doubt creeps in alongside the financials, and having children, you become much more risk averse. But actually, it's about believing in yourself more than anything, and having others who believe in you, I think. But just realizing that you don't have to do it all overnight, but if you make small steps every day, then you can ultimately make a difference to your life. And again, this isn't necessarily about changing career. This is also, I think, as much as anything, this is about changing outlook. You could still be doing the same job in 10 years' time, but your outlook and your approach to it could be completely different if you practice gratitude and you have good self-awareness.
Well said, and I could not agree more. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to completely quit your job and do something brand new, right? Like you and I have done. But
well, that's the other thing. Sorry, Ashwin, but you can add things in as well. You could do the same job, but is there some way you could volunteer? Is there something you could do in the evening? I think it's all about connections. A book which touched me profoundly a few years ago was Johann Hari's Lost Connections, which is just a beautiful book, and that all talks about what we've really lost in these recent years, which is those rich tribes. So not these 5,000 Facebook friends or 10,000 Twitter followers, but actually those few people in your life. We're really built to know no more than 100 or 150 people maximum at a deep level. Those deep connections, and that doesn't have to be in your workplace, but it could be, could you join a local walking group? Could you become a mentor for a young person? Could you volunteer at a soup kitchen? All these things are things you can do where you get an opportunity to really touch someone on a personal level. So I think thinking about not just what you do 9 to 5, but also, is there other things that you could do that would really give a bit more purpose and meaning to your life and to others?
Well said, Ben. Again, I knew this was going to be a wonderful conversation. Thanks for being so frank and forthright and vulnerable, which I completely agree. I think the world needs more of that to be able to empower others to find their own second mountains. Again, thanks for your time, Ben.
Thank you very much. Very nice to speak to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.